Good morning. So our objective today is we're going to graph a line using slope-intercept form. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is slope-intercept form. So what slope-intercept form is, it's this equation y equals mx plus b, and this equation represents a line. So if we look at this equation, our m here will represent our slope, and the b here will represent our y-intercept. So let's talk a little bit about what those two things are. So if you remember in our past lessons, we talked about slope. We could find our slope of a line by using the formula y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, or we could find our slope by finding the rise over the run. So we're going to need that information today in order to graph a line in slope-intercept form. The next thing we need to talk about is what is a y-intercept. So a y-intercept is where the line will hit the y-axis. So if we look at this graph on the screen, we have an x-axis, which is here, this whole axis, right? And then we have a y-axis, which is the vertical axis. So our y-intercept will be the point on where the line hits the y-axis. Okay, so using those two things, we're going to graph a line in slope-intercept form. So let's take a look. So this problem, these are the problems that go along with the PDF in the Google Classroom. So the first thing we need to do to graph this line is we have to identify our slope, and we have to identify our y-intercept. So remember, our slope-intercept form is always y equals mx plus b. So for this first problem, our slope, because we have negative x, we have to remember that's actually negative 1x. So our slope here is going to be negative 1. And then our y-intercept is 2. So our b is 2. So that's the first step. Now we can graph our line. So the first, we always want to start at the y-intercept. So we always want to start here on the y-axis. So we start at 2 on the y-axis. So that point right there is our y-intercept. Now we're going to use our slope to find another point. So I'm going to rewrite my slope as rise over run. So I'm going to go negative 1 over 1. So now I have a rise and I have a run. So I'm going to go down 1 and then over 1. And then I'm going to put another point there. We can actually do it again. Down 1, over 1. And then I'm going to put a point there. And then in order to graph this line, we just draw a line through those points that we plotted. And then you have to make sure when you graph a line that you put the arrows at the end, because lines will continue on forever and ever. Okay, let's look at this next problem. So remember, our first step is to identify our m, which is our slope, and our b. So our slope here is 3 over 2, and our b is negative 3. So we always start at the y-intercept. So our negative, we have negative 3, Now we have, remember, this is rise over run. So now in order to find the next point, we're going to use our slope. So I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to run 2. So that's the next point. And now I'm going to do it again to find another point. So I'm going to rise 3, and I'm going to run 2. So now I have these 3 points right here that I just plotted using my slope. And now I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to try to draw a line through those 3 points. I kind of missed that third one, but you get the idea. Okay, and then we put the arrows at the end. Okay, the next one, this one's very similar to the last one. So we are going to identify our slope, which is -2 over 3. So notice that I kind of switched it a little bit because we have our slope here is -2 over 3. But in order to have a rise over a run, we have to put that negative somewhere. So you can either put it with the numerator or you can put it with the denominator. Either way, it will still give you the right line. Okay, so that's how we deal with that negative. And then we have the y-intercept is 3. So we're going to start at the y-intercept. This is my starting point. And I'm going to put a point on the 3 on the y-intercept. Okay, now my rise over my run. So my rise is negative, so I need to go down 2. Down 2. -2. And then my run is positive, so I'm going to run +3. We can do one more. Go down 2, and then run 3. Okay, so now I have these 3 points, and I'm going to draw a line through those 3 points. And that is your answer. Okay, so the next one, we're going to first identify the slope and the y-intercept. So our slope here is 1 because it's just x. So remember, it's 1x. I'm going to rewrite that as 1 over 1. So I have a rise over a run for when I need it. And then my y-intercept is 4. So remember, we start here. We're always starting on the y-axis. So we start here, and then I'm going to rise 1 and run 1. I'm going to rise 1, I'm going to run 1. And that is the graph of our line. So I'm just going to draw a line. Through those 3 points, and that is my graph. Okay, so first step, remember we have to identify the slope. So our slope is 2. So any whole number you can put over a 1 in order to make it rise over run. Because remember, 2 divided by 1 is just 2. Now my y-intercept is -5. So I'm going to start at -5. I'm going to put a point on the -5 on the y-axis. That's the y-intercept. Now I'm going to rise 2 and run 1. I can actually do it again. Rise 2, run 1. I'm going to point a point where I hit. So now I'm going to just draw a line through those 3 points. and then put the arrows at the end. Because remember, a line goes on forever and ever. Okay, so this next example is a little unique because we haven't seen it yet. It's not in the form y equals, it's actually x equals. So if you remember in a previous lesson, we learned that x equals 2. So this is going to give us an x-intercept of 2. So this line is actually not even going to hit the y-axis. So if it's x equals anything, whatever that number is, it's going to be the intercept. So it's going to be a vertical line through the x-axis at 2. And then this one's similar. So we have y equals 1. We could actually think about this in slope-intercept form as y equals 0x plus 1, right? So we would have a slope of 0 and a y-intercept of 1. So our line is going to start at 1, but it has 0 slope. So it's just going to be a horizontal line through that y-axis at 1. Okay, so if we have an equation or a slope, an equation of a line that is y equals a number, that number is going to be the intercept, and it's going to be a horizontal line through that intercept on the y-axis. And that is how you graph a line using slope-intercept form.